Good morning. This is Sergeant Fave. Today I'm here to teach you resiliency. Specifically, we're going to go over the skill of put it in perspective. So put it in perspective is a very important skill, especially with everything that's going on right now. A lot of you are gearing up to go to basic training. We've got a lot of things going on as far as the COVID-19 and illness and a lot of uncertainty out there. So put it in perspective is a way for us to reduce the catastrophic thinking patterns where we get in a situation where we might go down the rabbit hole and make a situation worse than it actually is. So, go ahead, next slide. All right, so put it in perspective, you can see here that it helps to build optimism. Optimism is in fact more in line with reality than the pessimistic view that sometimes is easy to fixate on. Put it in perspective helps to lower anxiety so that we can accurately assess the situation and make positive movement or positive action and to be able to overcome that situation. Next slide. Catastrophizing. Catastrophizing is when you waste critical energy ruminating about the irrational worst case outcomes of the situation. It prevents you from taking purposeful action. So what does that mean? It's when you're sitting there and you wake up late for a very important meeting that you have that day, and rather than you making a phone call, letting them know that you're going to be a couple of minutes late and starting to get yourself ready, instead you worry about the fact that you are going to be late, you're going to get in trouble, people are going to view you as less than what you are, or less than what you wish to be viewed. And ultimately, while you're worrying about all these things, you're not actually taking any steps to get yourself to where it is that you need to be. So that's catastrophizing. It is that thoughtfulness that wastes time and prevents you from taking any sort of positive action. Next slide. Okay, so there are different types of catastrophizing. There is the downward spiral, scattershot, or circling. So the downward spiral is typically known as going down the rabbit hole. It is where you have one incident that happens and ultimately you continue to dig deeper into that situation and ultimately the cause and effect that it has on your future. Scattershot is someone that is just all over the place. It could be that they woke up late, and then it could be their uniform doesn't fit, and they don't have anything to make for breakfast, and their car is on E. A bunch of things that don't necessarily seem to be tied to the one incident that started the catastrophic thinking, but ultimately are another thing that is concerning to them. And then there is circling. Circling is just fixating on a couple of different things and just going around and around about those same things. So I woke up late. It's a 30-minute drive to get to the office. I have to stop and get gas, but I woke up late. It's a 30-minute drive to get there. I have 12 minutes left, and I'm out of gas. And you just keep going in that circle, and ultimately you don't make any kind of positive movement. So catastrophizing creates high levels of anxiety. It decreases your focus and increases your sense of being helpless. Prevents you from taking purposeful action, and ultimately it stops you from achieving what it is that you are in fact able to achieve. Next slide. Okay, catastrophizing is not contingency planning. So contingency planning is actually a positive thing. It is us taking into account the potential shortfalls or negative outcomes that we could face and having a plan to be able to deal with them as they surface or as they come up, if they come up. Contingency planning is productive. Catastrophizing is counterproductive. The reason that contingency planning is a productive matter is because it's something that allows you to have a plan, but once you've developed a plan, it doesn't require any additional thought. If that situation doesn't arise, there's no need for implementation. If it does arise, you already have a way to make positive action without having to develop it on the fly. Next slide. Okay, so some triggers of catastrophic thinking. The situation is ambiguous, so the situation is unclear. Somebody gives you instructions, but you're not totally sure what it is that they're looking for or what is expected of you. An example of that would be at my office tomorrow morning at 08. It seems like a clear enough task. However, I didn't tell you what for. I didn't tell you what to bring. You could now think that perhaps you're in trouble. Maybe you did something wrong, or I have some reason to want to speak with you for a mistake that you may have made. When in reality, it could just be that everybody's coming to my office at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning because we have a meeting that we're trying to make something better. So if you find yourself in an ambiguous situation, you can ask for clarity. That's a good way to help clear the air. Something you value highly is at stake. Health, wealth, anything like that, when those things are on the line, it tends to increase this catastrophic thinking. It makes it a little bit more of a high-stakes situation. You're already run down or depleted, so you are going through a period of time where you're not getting adequate rest. And you could be physically exhausted, you could be mentally exhausted, you could be emotionally exhausted, or you could be any combination thereof. And that makes it easier for you to fall into this type of thinking trap. You already fear the situation. So if you were someone who didn't want to come up and give a presentation where you're on camera, you may already have some apprehension or anxiety about that situation, therefore adding to the catastrophic thinking pattern. Or it's your first time doing something. One of the examples I like to use for this is your first job interview. You know, I can remember sitting outside waiting to be called in for my first interview and having absolutely no idea what to expect. And feeling very much like I was not going to have the words to answer the questions that I was asked. And it was a very high anxiety type of situation for me. Ultimately, the more that we do something, the more accustomed we become to that concept, and the more efficient that we are and able to handle it. Next slide. Okay, put it in perspective. What's the goal? The goal of put it in perspective is to lower anxiety so that you can accurately assess the situation and deal with it. So we're not going to totally diffuse the situation. The fact that you may have woke up late for something that was very important, we can't undo that. We can't go back in time. However, we can help bring that level of anxiety down to something that's manageable so that you can get through it. The goal is not to pretend that all is well, to deny real problems, or to take away anxiety completely. This isn't a magic pill. It is simply a way to help you to make some positive movement towards accomplishing your overall objective. Next slide. Okay, so how do we do it? Put it in perspective. What are the steps? Step one, describe what it is that caused you to start this catastrophic thinking pattern, the activating event. Step two, capture your worst case thoughts. Why capture worst case? Because that tends to be the mindset that we are already in when we realize that we need to do this exercise. So rather than trying to switch gears, let's just capture how we're feeling right then and there. We'll write it down and then we'll move on. Step three, generate best case thoughts. So this is flipping what you're already feeling on its head and saying, we're going to take everything negative that we're feeling right now and we're going to turn it into a positive. We're going to make it to the extent that it's unrealistic or unbelievable, and probably even at the end will make us giggle. Step four, identify the most likely outcome. And that's somewhere in the middle between how you're currently feeling, the best case scenario that we can generate. Somewhere in the middle there lies what's really going to happen. And then step five, we're going to develop a plan to deal with what we think is actually going to come from it. So I will say that for this specific exercise, the order that you do these in matters, because it has a way of taking and morphing your mental state to put you in a more positive place so that you can make productive action. Next slide. Okay, so step one, we're going to break down exactly how we do this. So this is the activating event. Your squad is out doing a land navigation drill, you're late coming back, it's 20 minutes past the midnight deadline, and you've lost your way. So can start to create some anxiety on a bunch of different fronts, really. Your squad's out doing land nav, you're late, now you're already thinking, how these people that I serve with are going to think that I'm not proficient at this task. It's 20 minutes after midnight, so you're probably already tired, and you've lost your way, so now you're alone in the woods going, it's dark, nobody's around me, I have no idea where I'm at, I'm out past when I'm supposed to be here. So all those things can kind of build on one another and make this a pretty anxious situation. Okay, go ahead, next slide. So to capture our worst case thoughts, some of the things that we may think, I touched on already, that the people that we serve with are not going to think that we're proficient at this task. They're never going to trust us. I'm never going to be able to be a proficient infantryman if I can't find my way around in the woods. I'm going to get smoked by my platoon sergeant when I get back. I'm going to get an Article 15 for being late, and ultimately it's going to lead to me being shunned from this unit, and I'm going to have to find a different job, and I'm going to have to transfer into a different organization, and ultimately it's going to ruin my career, which is going to impact my family. My wife's going to leave me, all these things. And it kind of sounds a little bit extreme, but that's what you're building on. That's where your mind's at. So go ahead, click the button. So what they've got, Sergeant's going to be pissed. He's going to make everyone in the unit come looking for me. They're all going to hate me. They just want to turn in for them. Everybody else is tired. Go ahead. The guys in the unit will turn against me, and I'll be getting a negative counseling statement. I have no support here. Be chaptered out of the Army. Never get another job in this economy. Family will be ashamed, want nothing to do with me. Girlfriend will dump me for someone who makes more money. Never meet anyone else, and I'll end up alone and homeless and dead by the age of 25. So, pretty extreme. That being said, that's typically the path that we tend to walk when we're in this catastrophic thinking pattern, is that this one simple event, bad as it may be, is going to affect the entire rest of my life, when in reality it probably will not. Okay, go ahead, next slide. All right, so step 2, we captured worst case as a chain. So in order to generate the thought and idea, keep asking, then what happens? What next? And just keep building on it. If this happens, then this will likely happen. And continue to go down that rabbit hole until you have exhausted all of the negative thoughts that you're carrying with you. So either you hit the, and I'll die alone point, or something that you say, and what next? I don't have anything else to add to that. Then you're at a point where you can move past the worst case. So don't stop until you've exhausted what's running through your head. Rate your mood, focus, energy level while you're in your worst case. Okay, next slide. So next we're going to generate the best case. So best case thoughts could be that you're out 20 minutes past, you find some sort of unexploded ordnance and ultimately save the lives of your entire platoon. You receive some sort of meritorious award for protecting the health and welfare of the unit. You're a legend in whatever unit it is that you currently serve, and ultimately you make it up through the ranks, and you are eventually someday the leader of that organization. So go ahead. When I turn around, see a few soldiers walking around the corner. They're lost too. They tell me I'm the only one who actually found the rest of my points. I'll pull it together and lead them back to the check-in point. Sergeant is pleased, gives me a coin. tells the command to keep an eye out for me. I'm likely to advance quickly. And you're moving through a positive type of scenario, even though you find yourself in a negative type of situation. All right, step 3. Now that we've identified the worst case outcome and the best case outcome of the situation, now we're ready to find what is most likely going to happen. So the best case, we're going to build as a chain. Don't stop till you run out of ideas. Rate your mood, energy level, all of that. What you're trying to do is you're trying to pull yourself out of that deep, dark, anxious feeling and generate some sort of a positive feeling. Okay, so next is step 3. Go ahead. Most likely. So most likely outcomes are, they're going to start to sound the sirens. You're going to hear them. You're not going to be too far off. You'll be able to make your way back. They will probably poke at you a little bit. They may make fun of you, tease you. But ultimately, you're going to be just fine. It's not the first time that anybody's been lost on a land navigation course, and it's certainly not the last time. Everybody will still trust and believe in you as a soldier, and ultimately you will move on and develop the same friendships and things that you would have if you came back on time. So you're going to identify those, so go ahead. Realize I'm missing, send a vehicle. I get back to the check-in point, the sergeant yells for a few minutes. You go back to the base. The other guys ride me about it. At first formation tomorrow, the sergeant says, most of us found our points last night, and gives me a dirty look, and he moves on to something else. So the most likely outcomes focus on emotions, behaviors, and other people. If any of the thoughts listed near the top of the worst case or best case column, make sure to include them in your most likely column as well. So rate your mood, focus, and energy level, and develop a plan for dealing with the most likely outcomes, which is step 4. We are now going to develop a plan on how we're going to overcome this. So go ahead. Okay, develop a plan of action. So what could your plan of action be? It could be that you are going to make some noise, or you're going to take out your cell phone, which was wrapped in tape. You're going to cut the seal, and you're going to call your platoon sergeant and say, Sergeant, I am lost. Ultimately, they're going to come get you. You're going to return. Most of the other things in the most likely outcome are probably going to happen. They're going to be a little bit upset. They're going to make fun of you. But ultimately, by tomorrow, it's all going to have blown over, and you'll continue on just the same as you would otherwise. So go ahead. I'll walk out to the road and look for a vehicle. Do some deliberate breathing, and check over my equipment to calm down. Joke about it with my buddies so they see that I'm a good sport. And make sure that I'm on my game the next few days so the sergeant has nothing to get on my case about. So, pretty simple. Having that plan helps you to start making some positive actions or some positive movement. So, developing a plan for dealing with the most likely outcomes, and if necessary, briefly develop a plan for preventing the worst and increasing the best. So what that means is, try to build in a safeguard from allowing the most likely outcome to start to shift to the worst, and ultimately try to incorporate a plan that makes it more beneficial to you in the long run. Go ahead, next slide. Okay, so key principles. Catastrophizing depletes energy, stops problem solving, and generates unhelpful anxiety. Order matters. So like I said, you have your activating event, then you're going to do your worst case, best case, most likely, develop a plan. Develop a plan. Once you're focused on the most likely outcome, develop a plan for dealing with that, because that is what we are probably going to be faced with. And optimism being the primary target of put it in perspective helps us to build optimism and to look at things in a more positive light. Go ahead, next slide. Okay, so the practical exercise, I understand that we are in a little bit of a unique situation here with this being online. So you can pause this video at any point and you can work through a practical exercise either by yourself or with a friend or family member that you have there available to you, and just try to work through the same thing that we just kind of highlighted, so that you get familiar with what it feels like to work through the put it in perspective matrix. Okay, go ahead next. Okay, so how to do this: pick a common activating event that can trigger catastrophizing. You lost a sensitive item, or a fight with a spouse, child, friend, and they end the call abruptly, so they hang up on you. That you can pick either of those two, or you can choose one of your own liking if you'd like to do that as well. So practice the PIP. You're going to capture the worst case thoughts, generate best case thoughts, identify your most likely outcomes, and then develop a plan for dealing with those. Next. Okay, so scenario one. Hopefully by this point in time you have already paused the video, worked through this, and this will help to either confirm that you were going down the right road or not. So go ahead next. Again. Okay. So everyone hates me. They're going to kill me. Shit, I won't be recommended for promotion. I don't have what it takes to stay in the Army. Won't be able to support my family. I'm a failure. Family will think I'm a failure. Never find another job. And will end up on the streets. Family move in with relatives, and I'll die alone on the streets. Okay. Doesn't have to exactly mirror that, but that is, the general direction of your worst case scenario. Best case thoughts. I'll be immediately recommended for promotion. Be the fastest NCO to reach Sergeant Major in the history of the Army. Get a corner office in the Pentagon. The President will personally call me for advice. Or retire early and live on the East Coast. So, good stuff, right? And most likely outcomes. We're going to spend hours looking for it. I'm going to get cussed out. I'll be embarrassed. Might get ART5, or you might get some sort of non-judicial punishment, Article 15 or whatnot. I might find it. All the guys will be ticked at me. And how do you deal with that? So now we're developing a plan on how to deal with what's most likely going to happen. Go ahead. Develop new strategies to maintain positive control of my sensitive items. So that's where the dummy cord was invented. Everybody ties everything to their weapon, to themselves. Things like that. I'll talk to my battle buddy about the situation. Let my squad leader know that I'll do my best not to let him down again. And I'll accept the guy as being really ticked off and use it as motivation to do better. Okay. Scenario number 2, worst case thoughts. Think I'm an a-hole. They're not going to want to talk to me the next time I call. They're going to cut me off completely. When I get home, they'll tell me to get out of the house and not come back. They'll trash my car. I'll have to take the bus and leave town. The bus gets into an accident. Everyone is killed. Okay, pretty dark. It's a good depiction of the worst case thoughts. Best case thoughts for that scenario? Go ahead. They were using their cell phone and their battery ran out. Cell phone company will send them $50,000 for their trouble. We'll invest the money in some real estate, make a fortune, buy a professional football team. I'll coach the team, lead them to the Super Bowl. We'll win the Super Bowl, and I'll get elected to the Hall of Fame. And yeah, pretty ridiculous. It put a smile on my face, so hopefully that's what it does for you too, because that's what it's designed to do. it's designed to lighten the mood. So when you feel yourself start to smile and you feel that internal mood starts to change, then you're in a good place to start to identify the best or the most likely outcome. So go ahead with most likely. They'll be frustrated with me. I'll be angry for a little while. I'll be pretty tense for a few hours. We'll both cool off and talk again when we're calm. And life will go on, right? They'll develop a plan of action. Do some extra PT to let out some steam. Talk to someone I trust about the situation to get my thoughts together before I talk to my spouse, child, or friend again. And you'll have a conversation, and ultimately you'll work through it, and things will be better. So, working with a partner, choose an activating event, capture your worst case, generate best case, identify most likely, notice your mood, focus on your energy level, then develop a plan for dealing with the most likely outcomes. So this is just some additional practice. You generate your own activating event for this one, and go ahead and work through it. Just when you do it, really focus on, when you're doing the worst case, focus on how it is that you feel as you're going down that road. Some of it, when you're doing it as an exercise, may almost seem comical. I'll end up dead and alone on the streets, whatnot. It doesn't really sound believable, but when you're in that catastrophic thinking pattern, sometimes those things seem very plausible. So just keep in mind your mood, but then notice how your mood changes when you shift gears. When you go from worst case scenario, which is where your mind is currently at if you're catastrophizing, to the best case scenario, and all of a sudden it's, you getting a promotion or being the ambassador of the United States or the president or who knows what, landing on Mars and walking around. Just crazy stuff that's pretty far-fetched, but you start to feel the mood lighten, and you start to say stuff like, oh, that's ridiculous. You start to get that giggle and that sense of happiness. That's when you're in a good spot to really dive into what is most likely going to happen. Okay, go ahead. Some questions to ask yourself or to answer. What did you learn through this exercise? And how can it help you moving forward with things that you are likely to face? Going to basic training, advanced individual training, overcoming, this pandemic that we're currently faced with. When you find yourself in a situation that generates anxiety, how can this help you to get yourself out of that negative thinking pattern? In which column was the most difficult to create? Worst, best, most likely, and why? I will tell you that typically the worst case scenario is the easiest to create because we focus a lot on the negativity, and it's it's very easy to pull that out of a situation. Well, the bad things that happen, but it's very difficult sometimes to generate some good things that can come from a bad situation. So think about those things. In the next slide. What situations will put it in perspective be most helpful with? How can you use these skills when you are getting ready to depart for training? How can you use these skills when you're at training and you're faced with a situation that causes you undue stress or anxiety? How can you help yourself or even your battle buddy while you're down there at training to overcome some of these negative thought patterns that we tend to get trapped in? How can put it in perspective make you a better soldier, family member, or DA civilian? And how can put it in perspective help soldiers, family members, and DA civilians be more effective in coping with stress? Go ahead, next slide. Okay. So the check on learning, what is the skill? Put it in perspective as a method to stop catastrophic thinking and deal with the most likely outcomes. When do I use it? Put it in perspective when you are making a mountain out of a molehill or making a Himalaya out of a mountain. How do I use it? Describe the activating event, capture the worst case, generate the best case, and identify most likely outcomes and develop a plan for dealing with the most likely outcome of the situation. Okay, if there aren't any questions, which there aren't because this is virtual learning, you can text your questions on the GroupMe app, and we will be happy to answer them. But I wish you the best of luck with everything, and thank you for your time and attention.